Get ready before life happens. The podcast helping you navigate life's what ifs.
Why do some people feel instantly trustworthy while others with the same credentials don't? Welcome to Get Ready Before Life Happens. I'm pleased to be joined today by Derek Pollard. Derek, welcome to the podcast.
Well, it's great to be here, Tony. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, well, excited to have you on. I love your 10-minute marketing minute, which I just mangled, but I hope people out there know what I'm talking about, and there'll be a link to it in the show notes. So, Derek, let's jump in. What is your origin story, and how did it lead you to helping people find their authentic voice?
Well, this could become an entire series of podcasts.
Okay.
I've lived and worked all over the United States. I've moved every 2 to 4 years since I was a baby. So I've had a chance to really get to know the breadth and the depth of this extraordinary country. And I'm really grateful for that because it's given me a window into what it's like to be in a particular place. Not just as a traveler, not just as a conference attendee, but to really get to know what it's like to live somewhere specific and what the pace of life is, and even what the language is like. I mean, for somebody who works with advisors on their messaging, these are little things, but to know the difference between hot pot and casserole, for instance, or to have an understanding of when you walk into the Coney Island restaurant, which style are you supposed to order? Those little nuances can make all the difference. And so I've had that great good fortune over the course of my career to move around. The other part of it is I come to advisor marketing from a somewhat different background. I spent the majority of my career in editing and publishing and in education. So I've worked with New York Times bestselling authors. I've worked with Guggenheim Fellows, refining what they're doing on the page, on the screen. It's been an incredible experience. And working in education, I mean, I've had a chance to help thousands of writers discover their voice and begin to use it in ways that they hadn't thought they were capable of using. And so being able to develop those processes and be around for so many aha moments has really been extraordinary. And that's what I wind up bringing to the work I do with advisors at Constellar Creative.
That's awesome. So, as you talk about, is being able to use your voice is definitely something that I think we don't talk about enough. So, before we jump into that, let's back up for a minute. What is an authentic voice?
Oh, goodness. I mean, we were talking about before we started recording here, the ways in which buzzwords can kind of get in the way. And unfortunately, authenticity seems to be one of those buzzwords, right? We hear it all the time. The danger there is it begins to lose its meaning, but it's too important for us to get caught up in the buzz, right? I would say the same thing for behavioral finance. Authenticity is you being you in the way only you can be. And in a relationship economy like the one we're finding ourselves in, where trust, credibility, and relatability are so important, being able to be you without getting in your own way is absolutely integral. And one of the things that I find quite often is that disconnect that happens when advisors think that they have to, quote unquote, do marketing, is when they get away from all of the relationships that they built with clients, all of those calls, all of those testimonials they may or may not be collecting, all of the reasons behind the referrals. The minute you start thinking you've got to do something different than that when it comes to your marketing or your messaging, of course it's going to seem artificial. It's going to seem like something you've got to do or perform. But when we're talking about authenticity, what we're really talking about is you just having those client calls out loud so that the people who don't know you yet have an opportunity to get to know that person.
I love that, is being authentic. It allows people to get to know you. And I think, that is so important, that we lose that. The people aren't really connecting with us because we're playing this role. Quite often, even the imposter syndrome. It's hard to have imposter syndrome when you're playing yourself. And you're the best person to play yourself. And I think that also differentiates it, because then you're finding clients or colleagues or whatever, people to work with, collaborators that are like you, because you are yourself rather than somebody else. And I think that can lead to a lot of discomfort in relationships, is because you're constantly trying to be that person.
Oh, I mean, that's true personally and professionally, right? And that brings up another point about authenticity. I think there's also a fear that it requires you to expose yourself in ways that you may be uncomfortable with or may not seem suitable for your ideal client. And that's not true at all. We're not talking about oversharing, right? We're not talking about you delving into areas publicly that you may not be comfortable with. It's just, if your LinkedIn profile photo, for instance, shows you clean shaven, in a suit, you got your watch, everything's glossed up, right? And the person who meets you on a discovery call encounters somebody who has a beard and is wearing a golf shirt, right? And has a more laid back, relatable vibe, right? Another one of those buzzwords. But if that's the person that your prospective client is going to meet, that's the person that you want to be showing up as on your website, on your social media profiles, in the videos that you're recording. You want to be the person you are, and you want to trust, just like you said, Tony, and I think this is such an important point. You want to trust that the people that you're attracting are already right fit clients for you. And that means your discovery calls, just like with effective messaging, go from, hey, tell me a bit about what you do, where you're coming from, to, wow, I've been following your content. Your LinkedIn posts are fantastic. I've been subscribed to your newsletter for the past 6 months, and I'm really interested in taking the next step with you.
Yeah, well, and I think that goes into another area, is whether, we're talking as financial advisors, and for people who aren't financial advisors, when you're looking to make business connections or any type of
Yes.
connection, is to show an interest in the other person. So what you're talking about is, it's easier to work with people that you're interested in anyway. So, like you said, is you can comment on other people's LinkedIn posts, find people that you find interesting, because they're probably going to find you interesting as well, because you're sharing the same interests. So I think that's really valuable advice. So one of the things, we talk about is saying what you mean. So
Mhm.
why is saying what you mean, the way you mean to say it, harder than it sounds?
Well, let's take a couple of examples. Want to talk politics, Tony?
We better not talk too much politics.
And there we go, right? In that context, particularly now, it's always been true, right? Those are either conversations we tend to have in really loud voices, or just like we saw, they tend to be conversations we tiptoe around until we feel like we're speaking with somebody we can trust, right? The same thing would be true, and this is absolutely the case for financial advisors. You're the person who's having conversations with your clients that they're uncomfortable having with practically everyone else in their life, which is an extraordinary opportunity for you. And from my perspective, a great gift. It's one of the reasons I love working in financial services. The work advisors do is absolutely not just critical in terms of establishing the financial independence, but in terms of allowing people to really become more informed and make better decisions, right? And I think that that's very, very important for us to keep in mind. The challenge, of course, is how do you wind up saying what you actually mean to say without alienating people, without painting yourself into a corner? And I think that that's both a balancing act, in the same way you don't want to overshare in terms of authenticity of being yourself, but you want to be comfortable enough to stake a claim, right? You don't want to let that sense of, well, we can't really talk about this unless, the door's closed and we're not recording. You want to be able to get to a point where you know where that line is, both for yourself and for your prospective clients. Where are you comfortable? You had mentioned earlier engaging with other people, right? What are your interests? As you were saying, like, are you really interested in John Coltrane? Do you love reading the work of James Baldwin? Have you been listening to the audio book of Jaco Pastorius's biography? What are your interests? Weave those in. Gives you the opportunity to open those doors to having the deeper conversations that are really going to establish the trust that you're looking for and that you need in your business, regardless of what industry you're in.
I love that. Although a shout out to John Coltrane and his famous album, Big Steps.
Oh, here. Goodness gracious. That's on heavy rotation here at the Constellar Creative offices.
One of my favorites. So for everybody out there, John Coltrane. So
yeah.
That's our recommendation for the day, our hot take.
I love it.
But I think, what you're talking about is weaving in their trust does help people gain trust. Is a lot of us do it instinctually, and for some of us, it's a little bit harder to do that. But it does require a level of vulnerability. But also, I found that when you're vulnerable, to a certain degree, sometimes you don't want, it's easy to cross the line and oversharing. Is that when you are vulnerable, to a certain point, people do get to know you. They do connect with you as a human. And I think that's so important, because we were talking pre-show a little bit about AI. So, how does that human connection, how is that going to help planners, educators, advocates with AI is making that human connection and building that trust?
Well, whether you're meeting virtually or in person, in order to get a buy, you've got to create buy-in. And that has to happen on a human level. There's so much that AI allows us to automate and create more time. But it's not just a question of efficiency, right? It's a question of what do you do with that time? And I think one of the things that you're suggesting, Tony, and I couldn't be more on board with this, is gives you the opportunity to reach out more, to take those steps, send a card, right? Schedule a call. It has nothing to do with the planning that you're working with. Catch up with somebody, drop them a text message or give them a call and see how they're doing. Just those little touches that we seem to have forgotten. Interestingly enough, I was just talking to my mom last night about this, about what seems to be, which is almost it defies the imagination for those of us who grew up doing this and understanding and knowing that there's the thank you card, right? And just the act of thanking someone for a gift no longer seems to be standard operating procedure, right? It doesn't seem to be one of those things that's being handed down. And so you think about the consequences of this, right? For somebody who has that expectation, what signal are you sending if you don't meet that expectation? Right? It means you have to become even more aware of who you're working with and ask them questions that may seem completely obvious, but require an answer. If you're working with clients who expect a thank you card, particularly after a gift, and you don't do that, you may have just cost yourself business, right? And so getting to know the people you're working with, what their expectations are, so you can meet them and exceed them and ask those questions, right? I think that's one of the places where our vulnerability also gets in the way is, we hesitate to ask the questions that seem like they already have answers. But my experience, certainly as an educator, is the minute you start asking those questions, everybody else loosens up and starts asking them too. And so I would always frame it as, hey, I'm the guy who's more than happy to stand up here or sit next to you and ask all the embarrassing questions so we can get the answers we need. Right? And it's
I think
amazing what a difference that makes.
Yeah, well, I think that's so important. I mean, that's really the main thrust of the show, is to help people ask better questions so they get the information they need. Is because if you're not asking questions, you're really not learning. And as you point out, is when you're thinking of a question, you're not the only one who asks that question.
Yeah.
You know, everybody, maybe not everybody else, but a lot of people are going to have that same question. And as educators, we know that for a fact, that somebody's out there thinking it. Um, and I think you also said something that I want to really emphasize, is the power of saying thank you. Is in our digital age, I've noticed that people don't say thank you very much. When they have an email communication, it's just sending that return email to say, hey, thank you. I appreciate what you've done. Or, wrapping up a LinkedIn message chain, or, WhatsApp, whatever, is that there's a lot of power to just saying thank you. And it's seeing somebody, it's appreciating them. I think that is very powerful. And we're talking about, here we're talking a little bit about client acquisition, but what you said is that you want to say thank you to your clients, and you show that you appreciate them, is because that is something clients do notice. And it's a really easy way to lose clients, is by not showing appreciation to them. So,
absolutely true. And, really, with the cost of new client acquisition, right? Both in terms of time and expense, one of the best things that you can do for your firm or your business is retain the clients you have, nurture those relationships, and not in a performative way, right? Not like, hey, here's me being grateful, I really appreciate you, but sincerely demonstrating, showing your appreciation for the people you have the great good fortune to work with. That goes such a long way. And again, depending on your industry, but this is certainly true for financial advisors, you're often looking for those generational clients. What an outstanding way for you to build that trust, that relatability, right? Knowing that you're going to be there, not just when the markets are crashing, not just when, the indicators suggest that you need, but as I said before, taking that extra step, getting to know these people. And Tony, you said this so well, as people, as the people they are, the people you get to help, right? Not just the clients, not just the prospects, right? Even the language we use quite often creates these little barriers. And it's a wonderful way for you, again, to differentiate yourself and show up in those meaningful ways that people remember.
I love that. Differentiate yourself and show up in meaningful ways. And I think, what we're talking about is getting to know people as actual people. Is the top producers, wealth management advisors, attorneys, everybody that I've ever met who's successful are people. They're known as the rainmakers, whatever other name you have, but they're the ones who are able to actually talk to people and have a conversation. It doesn't mean that you have to be an extrovert. All you have to do is just recognize the other person as a person and have a conversation with them. And it's something that's come up is, I have a lot of women on this podcast, and we talk a lot about female financial planners, and we talk a lot about how do you talk to a woman? And the answer pretty much is like, we just talk to her. It's a little more complex than that, but it's, as you see them, you talk to them, and that's something that we often miss. And, as we talk about advisor relationships, is seeing both people in a couple. But the other thing that you mentioned is generational clients, is that means including the kids in conversations. You can't expect the kids to stay as clients of your firm if you don't have a relationship with them. And, I don't know. How do you talk to advisors about that, Derek? Is that part of what you talk about?
Well, again, in terms of marketing and messaging, um, it's an integral part of the process. I don't know too many advisors who are like, yeah, I'm just going to stick with the clients I have. That's generally not what I hear. And so again, you need to be thinking, none of what we're talking about is meant to seem daunting. It's not like you're going to have to go through training courses day after day after day. It's just rekindle that sense of curiosity you have. And Tony, I think that example, the next time you're standing online, read the room, I don't hesitate to offer a kind word to the person behind the counter who's, readying your order or getting your coffee ready. A quick thank you, it makes all the world a difference. Some people are going to be receptive, some people aren't. Some people are having a day, right? I mean, that's part of it too. All of us have had that experience. But making that extra effort and just realizing that so often, again, particularly when you're out in the world, right? Not in this little box we live in so often, but when you're out in the world, you have so many opportunities to make those connections. And you had used the word before, and it's a word I can't draw a bold enough line under. Those kindnesses, those little moments, whether you're ever going to see that person again, what a shining moment in your day and theirs when you can exchange that energy of kindness. And, again, it doesn't cost you much to say,
Yeah.
hey, I really appreciate that. Or, wow. And again, you said this too, and this is very important. I don't want to in any way overlook this or make it seem less important than it is. You have to be respectful in your communications. You have to understand what's appropriate and what isn't. But those little kindnesses, a compliment, a thank you, a moment of gratitude, helping somebody. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I see people and don't see people helping one another in the subway, right? Out of towners trying to get around. I almost walked past a guy myself a couple of weeks ago, and I stopped myself. He was clearly looking for an entrance to a particular train. And I walked right by. He tried to get my attention, and I stopped. I paused and I went back because I've been that guy before, right? I've been that guy in a different country, a different state, a different city, not quite knowing how to get from point A to point B. I went back and I was like, hey, look, let's go. Just follow me. I'll take you to the train. It's a wonderful thing. It's not enough people know that happens in New York City all the time, every day. It's one of the reasons I love being here. But that can just change not just somebody's day, but that can change their outlook. And that has ripple effects, right? And those are, whenever you're putting positive energy out into the world, that comes around.
Well, and I was going to say, and it probably made your day that much better as well.
Felt good, right? It felt good. And every time you feel good, you do what you do that much better, right? And those are the little wins that add up to the big successes. This too is very hard. We're talking about authenticity. We're talking about marketing. We're talking about showing up for other people. That can get really fatiguing when you're seeing everybody's end results. You're seeing the big wins, but you're not seeing all the little steps it took to get there. That's really important too. The more of those steps you can show, the more of that story you can share, again, the more opportunity you have for people to start not just following, but following along. That's a totally different ball game.
Yeah. Well, that just always brings me back to Michael Jordan and how he talks about, like he goes, I had to take all these shots where I missed in order to hit the game winning shots. I had to work so many hours in the gym to be able to do what I did. And it's like, you look at it and you say, wow, he's Michael Jordan.
Right.
And then when you really get to know his history, it's pretty phenomenal how hard he worked. I mean, was probably the
It's,
hardest working guy ever in the, in the history of
well,
basketball.
it, Tony, and let's just pause at that for a second too. That's Michael Jordan, right? Like that guy didn't need to do all of that stuff. He was given gifts that are the envy of so many people the world over, but he kept working and refining. And I think that's one of the things that also we can lose sight of when we're talking about success, when we're talking about what it's like to be on social, to show up in your marketing, to excel at what you do. Even the very best, right? Even a John Coltrane or a Jaco Pastorius, they got there because they just never stopped. They never stopped being curious. They never stopped putting in the reps. They never stopped pushing themselves to get better. Now, I'm never going to be Michael Jordan. I'm never going to be June Jordan. I'm never going to be Arthur Rimbaud. But I can become the best version of me so that I can help more people become the best versions of themselves. And I'm going to keep pushing. That has nothing to do with the noise around me. It has nothing to do with all those endpoint successes that we see. It's me just knowing I can get better at this every day. And I'm going to continue to strive to do that.
Well, and I think that gets back to where we started, is that you aren't going to be Michael Jordan. I'm sorry, Derek, to break it to you over a podcast. So hot take here. But you are going to be able to be the best Derek Pollard. And that's gets back to the authenticity, is because none of us are going to be Michael Jordan. Sorry, everybody out there watching and listening. I hate to disappoint you. Maybe there's an 18-year-old kid out there listening who's going to be Michael Jordan. So to you, yeah, go for it. But for the rest of us, we can only be the best versions of ourselves.
Yes.
And it's much easier to be yourself. It just gives you a sense of relaxation, a sense of peace. I think because I'm older, I've learned that. But when you talk to people who are older, that's what they say, is that you stop feeling the need to be somebody else for everybody else. And that life does become more peaceful in certain ways because of that.
Well, and it allows you to know who you are. It allows you to know how you really function at your best, right? What do I need to show up to be the person who helps advisors and firms show up as themselves? How much energy do I need? How much charge in the battery do I need to be able to do that work? Right. And I don't make the mistake of measuring success against other people's benchmarks. Right. And that's a big part of this too. It's one of the reasons that I hear fatigue and agita from advisors and fellow marketers, is that it's so easy to compare ourselves to other people. And as I said, to compare our own journey to theirs, even though we're miles apart, years apart, decades apart. It does no one any good to hold yourself to those standards. Know where you're at in your journey. I'm not saying shut the rest of the world out. That does no one any good either. But know where you are in your journey and know what your particular benchmarks are, right? I mean, I have this conversation with advisors all the time. We talk about metrics in social media, right? How many impressions does this post get? If we go back 30 years, right? For some of us, that's a blink of an eye. For some of us, it's half a lifetime, right? But 30 years ago, if I said to you, hey, every day I can get you in front of 250 people, and I can guarantee that to you, you would have followed me to the ends of the earth. If I had said to you, now we look at that number in the context of a social media post, and let's say we have approximately 2,500 followers. So we're hitting that 10% threshold that actually indicates that's a successful post. We're thinking 250 people, that's nothing. Well, if you've got a carefully curated network And those 250 people are centers of influence. They're potential strategic partners. They're prospective clients of yours. Well, I'll take that every day, right? You're creating a connection there. You're not just becoming a content creator, right? And so it's very, very important to also consider context, how important that is for us. I'm still trying to get over I'm not going to be Michael Jordan, though. That's going to be, that's tough for me, Tony. That was tough to hear.
You're never going to come on the podcast again. I'm not taking your calls anymore. I do want to point out before we start to wrap up what you said about curating your network. I know that was something we were going to talk more about, but but since you brought it up, is just to emphasize that I think that's something that we tend to forget is curating our network. Is we would do that organically when we'd all go to meetings in person. You'd only get together for lunch with or coffee with people that there was a connection with or a relationship with. But now you get all these LinkedIn connection requests, all of us, and all these people, and it's like consider like whether there's a mutually beneficial relationship. There's nothing wrong with that because you're investing your time in your connections. So, and as you said, is like put the numbers in perspective. Is like, what is a realistic following? Because I was, so I was talking to my son about the number of listeners I have for the podcast. And I'm like, yeah, I don't feel like it's that many people. And he goes, well, think about it this way. And I was really surprised because my son is 20 years old. He goes, think about if all those people got together in a room. He goes, would you be happy for a talk? And I go, yeah, that would be incredible. And, so that puts in perspective. So when you say, if you put a post out and 250 people see it and engage with it, 250 people in a room is a lot. And, so that context of what you're saying is super important for people. So I just really appreciate you saying that because I think that is a really important point for us to think about when we look at somebody, because there are those people who have 10,000 followers on LinkedIn or social media, but are they the right followers, as you said?
Right. It's such an important consideration, right? And like you said, wise words from your son. So hats off to him. The other part of it is, how does that align with your growth goals, right? Let's just say 10% of that 250, can you onboard 25 new clients? Is that a realistic goal for you? Is that what you're aiming for? Do you have the capacity? It feels like it's become a popularity contest in so many regards. And I think we feel so much pressure to play the game in that way. But Tony, like you said, the minute we take that pressure off, and that's true for every point that we've made here, whether it's authenticity, showing up as yourself, being clear with yourself about what your goals are, being kind, right? Taking that extra moment to make a positive impression, all of that taken together has to do with what getting back to a concept we come to in marketing all the time. What's really at stake? What is underneath all of that? What are you trying to accomplish? Getting clarity there, it just takes so much of the pressure off. And when the pressure is off, you get to be yourself, right? And that's what the world needs. It needs every person to be themselves.
Yeah, I love that. The world needs everybody to be themselves because we all fill a role. Sorry, I'm trying to make a note and I'm not getting the note down for what you just said.
Good news is we have the recording, right?
Exactly. So, Derek, to wrap up, I have what's called the Get Ready Hot Take Trio. These are 3 quick questions that I ask all my guests. I'm going to tailor them a little bit for you. So, what is one myth you're trying to break about authenticity?
We touched on it earlier, that it requires you to expose yourself in ways you're uncomfortable with. That's not what we're talking about. This is not you going out and bearing every truth and every regret. And P.S., I don't trust anyone who says they live with no regrets in their lives. I think that stops a lot of people from embracing who they are out loud. And so I want to make sure, as we were saying, that people don't feel like that's what we're talking about, that they have to go out and be uncomfortable. And just to give you a practical example, if you're like, look, being in front of a camera is not my thing, but we hear so much pressure, right? People, feel like they're under so much pressure to be showing up on video. That's not you. It doesn't have to be. It's just, what do we do in place of that allows you to show up for people to be able to get to know you in the way that video allows them to get to know you, right? That's what we're talking about when we're talking about authenticity. Know yourself and know what your strengths are and improve. Continue to be curious and continue to push yourself to get better and better at being you.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think that's so important is, we do feel pressure to show up in certain ways, but if it's not what you're comfortable at, it's going to come through. You're going to hate it. It's going to be a slog.
Yeah.
While there are other ways you can do it that are going to be really easy for you because it fits your style.
Yeah.
So Derek, let's get out the time machine for a minute. If you could go back in time, knowing what you know now about authenticity and showing up as yourself, what advice would you give your younger self?
My late father would put it to me like this when we had this conversation. And it never quite took for me, only because it wasn't realistic. He would ask, what if money wasn't an option? What would you do? If money was, well, for me, money always was an option. It was a factor in all of that. So I couldn't answer honestly. But what he was actually asking me was this: what would you do if you had the opportunity to pursue that with all of your focus? And that would be the question that I would ask myself as a younger man. And that would be the advice that I would give myself: is go after it. Just go after it. Like you said, practice the shots. Put yourself on every position on the court until you can hit the shot you're going to need to hit as the buzzer is about to go. Practice, right? And pursue it. Go after what you know you want to do. We talk so much about luck playing a part in so much of this. And here's the truth, and this is really hard in such a quantifiable industry as financial services. You can't plan for luck. But what you can do is you can create opportunities for luck to find you, and you can be prepared when it does. And that makes a world of difference.
Yeah, what is that quote? Is preparation is where luck meets opportunity? I think John Wooden said that. So he was a pretty decent basketball coach.
He got a few wins.
So Derek, to wrap up, what is your number one tip to change the way we think about being authentic?
Give it a whirl. Try it out. And again, sometimes in the early going, if it's not something that's a default for you, if you're not the person, and I'll be very honest, right? I'm not really that person. I'm not somebody who would think to myself, oh yeah, I walk into a room and I just start chatting people up. That's really not me, except it kind of is. I'm finding as I actually look at myself, I kind of am that guy, or at least I'm that guy in certain situations on certain days when I feel most relaxed, when I feel most myself. I don't feel those barriers, right? I'm able to just show up and start a conversation. I'm able to talk to somebody who's waiting online with me, right? I'm able to strike up a conversation with somebody who's having a bad day, and it's clear they're having a bad day, and do it in a way that they're not just like, shut up, right? I think that's the thing. Just give it a whirl. See how it fits you and how how you do it best. And then just do the thing that builds success for you. Practice it. Start to do it more often, right? And then it becomes a default. And once it's a default, you don't have to think about it anymore, right?
Yeah, I love that practice. Is that so often overlooked? Is we do look at somebody else's success and go, wow, and we don't look at the hours and hours of practice that everybody puts into their craft, no matter what your craft is. The people at the top of the craft have put in the hours. There's
Absolutely
no
true.
easy way to do it.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And the thing is, the more pleasurable you can make the practice, right? I would imagine Jordan had any number of scenarios running through his head when he was on the court practicing, with nobody else watching. He had that story he would tell himself. Get that story. Listen to that voice in your thoughts, and so that you're putting yourself in that position, right? And then, like I said, it becomes something you don't think about. You just offer the word of kindness. You stop when somebody clearly needs help, and you help when you can, right? You follow up with clients in ways that they expect and that exceed their expectation. You don't even think about it. You just do it. That's the best version of you. And so you just want to practice that. It kind of seems odd, right? In a lot of ways, practice being yourself, but to become your best self, that's what you need to be doing.
I love that. And that's an excellent place to close. So, Derek, where can people learn more about you and your work?
You can always find me on LinkedIn. I seem to live there. So please don't hesitate to send me a DM. I'm happy to connect. I'd love to hear about what you're working on. If you need help with something in terms of messaging, marketing, strategy, just get in touch with me and let me know. You can also reach out via the Constellar Creative website, and that has my email address on it as well. So whatever you're most comfortable with, whatever's easiest for you, just get in touch. Let me know.
Yeah, and I'll give a shout out to your LinkedIn show, 10-Minute Marketing Makeover. You have some great guests, great tips. So
thanks. I really appreciate that. Well, we'll have you on at some point, Tony. I'm looking forward to that.
I'd love that. I'd be
Cool.
honored. So thank you, Derek, for joining us on Get Ready Before Life Happens.
Thanks again for the invitation, and I really appreciate it. What a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, this is fantastic. And thank you, everyone, as always, for tuning into this episode of Get Ready Before Life Happens. If you learned something today to change the way you think about authenticity and showing up as yourself, please be sure to subscribe and to share with a friend. You can also go to my website at tonystewart.com to join the Get Ready movement and receive my newsletter. And if you want to support the work that I'm doing, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/TonyStewart and donate to this podcast and help support my work with financial readiness. Because when life happens, the way you think about money matters.